2799 Thoughtborn. Cassie was dazed by the chaotic current of memories she was absorbing. In one memory, Rain was preparing to embark on a journey to Ascension. In the next, she was trying to escape the Ivory Island as it was being besieged by the thralls of the Hunger Domain. Sunny and Neffys were absent, gone to fight some unknown battle. The Fire Keepers, those most loyal to Changing Star among all of mankind, had fallen to the plague of Astarion, proving that the longing domain was all but extinguished. It did not make any sense. Why had they allowed things to become so dire? Even if the Dreamspawn held humanity hostage, there should have been a point where the price of inaction had grown heavier than the cost of engaging him in a direct battle. And yet, he had been allowed to continue reading his abominable influence until even the Tower of Longing was lost. The answers lay in Rain's memories, but those memories were gone, erased by Cassie herself. So, she had to abandon that direction and focus on a new one. In the beginning, when she had yet to remember who she was, her actions were nothing but instinct. But now that Cassie had collected more pieces of herself, solving her own being like a puzzle, she gained more control over her will. So, the speed at which she absorbed the memories vastly accelerated, and she could discern their nature more easily. The tendrils of her will shot through the ocean of memories, catching dozens of small shards that glistened weakly in the darkness. She was searching only for the memories of what had happened after the Council of the Champions of the Human Domain and the Siege of the Ivory Tower. The memories of the plague. The smaller shards flashed through her mind, becoming a part of her instantly. In one scene, Chief Bethany was spending a peaceful evening with Quentin, her romantic partner and a hidden blade of the Shadow Clan. His expression was somber. "Have you heard about what happened in the Glass Hell, Beth? The rumors are most likely exaggerated, but even if some of it is true, damn it. These days, it really feels like the world has gone mad." Beth, who was sitting on the sofa and reading a book, her feet resting on his lap, looked at him with a wry smile. "These days, the world has never not been mad, don't you think?" She turned a page and shrugged. The Glass Hell, the Glass Hell. I've heard about it. I wonder how much solar energy can be collected from that glass plane. Nobody is mad enough to build a solar farm in Godgrave, but the Glass Hell. That can be done, I think. Quentin looked at her in confusion and frowned. "Hey, I know how you love to lose yourself in academic ponderings. But this is a little inappropriate, don't you think? So many people have already died, and if the rumors are true, many more will die soon. Aren't you concerned?" Beth looked at him and sighed. Leaning forward to pat his shoulder, she said in a reassuring tone. "Don't worry, it will all be resolved soon, there's no reason to be concerned, really." He raised an eyebrow. "There isn't, why do you think that?" Beth looked at him and smiled. Her tone was chipper. "Because of Lord Astarion, of course. Hasn't he promised to help? I am sure he'll sort things out." Quentin froze. His expression did not betray any emotions, but his eyes trembled a little. What did you say?" Beth blinked a couple of times. "I said that Lord Astarion will deal with it. I mean, he's a supreme, right? And he's much older and more experienced than the other two. So, he'll help." Quentin remained silent for a while, frowning. Then, he asked in a neutral tone, "Didn't you get into a fight with Russell just a week ago because he was going around advocating for that man? You even put him on probation for disrupting morale." Beth tilted her head, surprised. Something odd glistened in her eyes, as if a golden spark ignited in their depths. Then, she laughed. "Oh, did I really? Well, I must have been in a mood. I'll have to apologize to Russell." In another memory, Seishan was looking at Ravenheart from the slopes of a tall mountain, accompanied by two of her sisters. Lonesome Howl was saying in a low tone, "They even smell different. It is difficult to notice, but once you know the scent, you can't mistake it for anything. There were a few at first, then many. Now, the entire city reeks of hunger. I don't even know how many people are still free of the plague. Nightingale is worried about the wrong things." Moonveil, who was standing nearby, raised an eyebrow. "What are you trying to say?" Lonesome Howl gave her a somber look. "I'm saying that while we are all running around panicked because of Mordret, what we should really be worrying about is being stabbed in the back." Seishan exhaled slowly. "I agree with Howl. I felt it, too. The blood flows differently now. Things are far worse than we anticipated. I don't know what Neffys is thinking, not burning the infection away." Moonveil shrugged. "She probably doesn't want to massacre half of the human population. Plus, is there really a need to dispose of the infected?" Both Seishan and Lonesome Howl gave her odd looks. "What do you mean?" Moonveil smiled faintly. The subjects of the hunger domain have not done anything remotely harmful yet. It doesn't seem like they are going to turn against humanity, either. The only thing they are guilty of is diminishing the power of changing stars domain. Is that really a crime worthy of being punished by death? Seishan frowned deeply. You were the first one to affirm your loyalty to Nephes. Why are you changing your tune now, all of a sudden? Moonveil met her gaze and tilted her head a little. Perhaps we were too hasty in dismissing him as an enemy. Lonesome Howl scoffed. You must have lost your mind. Have you forgotten that his real goal is to devour us all? Moonveil stared at her silently for a while. Then, she frowned and brought her hand to her forehead in confusion. Right, how did I forget? Her face was deathly pale all of a sudden, and she looked at her sisters with wide eyes. I can't be, I am still myself, right? Seishan and Lonesome Howl studied her with alarmed expressions. They were worried about their sister. But, at the same time, an even deeper anxiety was taking hold of them. How would they themselves know that they were still who they used to be? 2800. The sound of an opening door. In a different memory, Effie was staring at the fire dancing in her fireplace with a distant expression. Her usual cheerfulness was gone, and instead, a sense of doubt and unease had taken root in her hazel eyes. Soon, there was the sound of an opening door, and she glanced toward the entrance. She sighed heavily, and then forced herself to smile. A few seconds later, her husband walked into the room and looked at her in surprise. Oh, you're home early today. I thought we'd be barely seeing you in these next few weeks. Effie scoffed. Don't sound so disappointed. Her husband laughed and walked over to hug her. Never. I'm beyond happy that you're here. Ling will be beyond himself, too, once he gets back from his lessons. Oh, Areu hung gy. I can cook something up if you are. Effie smiled. You know me. I am never not hungry. As he went to prepare dinner for them, the smile faded on her face, and she studied his back with a complicated expression. As they ate and chatted, Effie kept glancing at her husband when he glanced away. Eventually, she asked, by the way, did you hire a new tutor for our dumpling? Her husband took a sip of tea and nodded. Yes, a history teacher. Why? Effie hesitated. Why does he need a new teacher? What's wrong with Julius? He laughed. Why, nothing is wrong with teacher Julius, of course. It's just that our son is quite energetic, and teacher Julius is not a young man. Plus, he can't be a specialist in everything. Effie remained silent for a while, then frowned. Still, who is that new tutor? What are his credentials? Was his background checked? Most importantly, why would you just go and hire him without discussing it with me first? Her husband seemed taken aback. What, you were just busy, that's all. Effie's frown deepened. I'm never busy when it comes to our son. You know that. It might have been a simple case of miscommunication. Her husband might have just made an impulsive decision, thinking about what was best for little Ling. Or, it might have been something else. Could it have been? Effie had been tense and alarmed as of late. She was especially anxious because the Dreamspawn had already expressed his interest in her son. So, she was sensitive to everything that had to do with little Ling. She wouldn't have even known that Ling had a new tutor if Sunny had not told her. Her husband would have never made a decision as important as choosing a teacher for their son without her, especially not when the plague of Astarion was spreading across the two worlds like a wildfire. He knew how perilous things were at the moment. That was not all right at all. That was suspicious. But no, perhaps, maybe she was just being paranoid. Perhaps she was wrong, and there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this. Her husband looked at her silently. Eventually, he said, that is not true. Effie was confused. What? He sighed. It's not true that you're never busy when it comes to our son. In fact, you are quite busy too often for him, or for me. I get it, I do. You are an important person. Your duties often keep you away from home, and sometimes, you have to leave for entire weeks to fight for humanity on the front line. I'm not blaming you for that. He shook her head. But it's unfair to say that you always have time for us. Effie stared at him, aghast. A sharp sense of guilt cut across her heart. But, at the same time, she couldn't help but notice that he had avoided answering any of her questions. Was it a coincidence, or a tactic? Could she still trust her husband? That question was maddening. The abominable ambivalence of it all cut her like a dull blade. She wasn't sure that he was being dishonest, but she also couldn't be sure that he was entirely sincere. She wanted to demand answers, but was afraid of finding out the truth. More than anything, she was afraid of accusing him of betrayal only to find out that it was all a misunderstanding. I hate it. I hate it all. Effie lost her appetite. Pushing the plate away, she looked at her husband and said, I want you to tell me something. He raised an eyebrow. What? Effie stared at him for a while, then said, tell me that the Dreamspawn is a vile scumbag, that he only has malice in his heart, and that Nephis is going to seal that wicked ghoul for all eternity sooner or later. Her husband looked at her with a faint smile. The silence stretched between them, making a cold shiver run down Effie's spine. Eventually, though, he chuckled. Is that all you want? Sure. The Dreamspawn is a vile scumbag, has only malice in his heart, and is going to be sealed for all eternity by Lady Nephis soon. Effie let out a relieved sigh. But then, she hesitated. Why, is he not angry with me? Shouldn't he be angry for being suspected? She looked at her husband, still unsure. He chuckled, shook his head, and focused on his food. Perhaps I was wrong, after all. As the fire burning in the fireplace reflected in his eyes, a golden gleam seemed to spark in their depths for a brief moment. ... And then, a scattering of other memories flashing like appalling snapshots of a dying world. Effie was sprawled on cold stones, iron chains binding her bloodied limbs. Only there was no trace of the hale, vivacious woman she had been anymore. Instead, she was like a corpse, so gaunt that it seemed that a gust of wind would break her in half. Her arms had become skeletal and weak. Her ribs rose like ridges, hugged tightly by the lifeless skin. Her stomach was so thin that it seemed to cling to her spine. Her gaunt face was sunken and bruised, with feverish eyes burning on it darkly. Her legs were like long sticks, bent awkwardly. It did not seem like she could move them anymore. Her body was a ghastly image of a beast that was slowly consuming itself, having already digested most of its own flesh. Then, there was the sound of an opening door, and she turned her head listlessly to look at the bars of her cage. A delicious aroma wafted through the stale air. Her husband appeared at the entrance of the dungeon, stepping carefully over the runes carved into its floor. He was carrying a tray brimming with all kinds of delicious food. He placed the tray in front of the cage and smiled. I brought your favorite. Effie simply stared at him, not saying anything. He hesitated for a while, then sighed. I simply don't understand why you're persisting in this foolishness, my love. All you have to do is tell me where our son is. He studied the ghastly wreckage of her body, his expression turning somber. You don't even have to say it. Just think it. Please, Effie, tell me where our son is. Let's end this. Where is little Ling? Effie remained silent for a while. Then smiled slowly. Her hoarse voice was like a dying echo. Oh, yeah, is the ghoul reading my thoughts? Then, turning away from her husband, she looked at the ceiling and suddenly let out a laugh. What am I thinking about now? Her husband's expression changed. He lingered for a moment, then frowned in confusion. Food. You're only thinking about food. Effie's grating laughter grew louder. Ah, what to do? The food. All I can think about is food. How unfortunate for that bastard, huh? Her laughter turned into coughs, and then into sobs. The food, I'm hungry. Somewhere else, Quentin and Beth were holding hands, smiling, as they looked at the sky. In the sky, the Ivory Island was being besieged by the Night Garden, minutes away from falling into the hands of the thralls of the Hunger Domain. Look, Beth, the Saints of Night are going into battle. Beth smiled joyfully. Yeah, that silver light, how pretty. And somewhere else, in Ravenheart, Seishan found herself having to spill the blood of her sisters. But before too long, she was of one mind with them again. 2801 Contagion. It began slowly. Red Hill was a small city, as far as human settlements in the Dream Realm were concerned. It was situated in one of the most remote regions of this dire world, far away from both Bastion and Ravenheart. The Glass Hell bordered the Chained Isles to the east and Godgrave to the west. From the south, it was confined by a breathtaking sea. The sea was placid like a lake and gorgeous like a dream, but its water was deadly poison. In fact, it was capable of melting human flesh in a matter of seconds. In a minute or two, only bones remained. That was why it was called the Bone Sea. From the north, the vast plain of the Glass Hell was washed by the mists of the Hollow Mountains. Considering how remote the Glass Hell was, Red Hill rarely saw visitors. The only people who visited it were the merchants traveling from Bastion to Ravenheart or the Lake of Tears. The caravans from the east arrived battered and in need of respite after a long journey, so they spent some time in the city before leaving for its final leg, the arduous crossing of Godgrave. The caravans arriving from the west, meanwhile, needed rest and repairs because of that crossing. The merchants brought with them building materials, food, and luxury items. They left loaded with mystical glass, which was the main export of Red Hill. Apart from the merchants, the Lord of Hell himself was a source of resources that locals needed to survive. As a saint, he was capable of bringing plenty of supplies from the waking world. That was one of the most vital roles saints played in remote settlements like Red Hill. Their power and martial prowess were of grave importance, naturally, but their value as logistical powerhouses was perhaps even greater than that. With a transcendent watching over a settlement, its citizens were not going to starve to death or die of thirst, at least. Masters were the same, even if they could only carry a modest load across the boundary of two realms. Having a personal relationship with a master meant living a more comfortable life than your neighbors. People of Red Hill were split very visibly between those who had little and those who had more. The latter could enjoy privacy and shade in their homes, because the walls of their homes were covered by wood or stone. The former lived in full view of their neighbors, because the walls of their homes were made of bare glass. There were very few secrets in Red Hill. Life here was simple and rewarding. Apart from hospitality services aimed at the passing merchants, the main local industry was mining, processing, and transporting glass. Mining glass in Hell was a tough and dangerous job, and sometimes, it was very hazardous. If a quarry grew too deep, it ran the risk of collapsing into the tunnels below and unleashing a swarm of the ghastly abominations of the hive. Luckily, the forces of the Maharana clan were strong and disciplined, while its fearsome lord seemed almost omniscient. Not only did the Lord of Hell govern the city and guarded the miners, but he also watched over the entire region, extending his protection to the caravans traveling from Godgrave or the Chained Isles. So, even if he was stern and strict, at times ruthless, the citizens of Red Hill had a lot of goodwill toward him and his clan. They felt like they had a future under his rule, which was a stark difference from the quiet hopelessness they had felt on the dying earth. And, of course, there was their radiant goddess, Changing Star, whose grace reached the subjects of the human domain even in this remote region. Protected by the Lord of Hell and guided by Changing Star, people felt satisfied with their lives. Most of all, they felt motivated to work hard and look forward to the next day because of how palpable the rewards of their labor were. Like all human cities in the Dream Realm, Red Hill was young. It was still in its founding stage, with an endless ocean of work that needed to be done, but because of that, people saw their city transform a little every time they woke up. Every day, there was something new to see. Their city constantly took steps forward, growing and becoming better suited for human life. So, it seemed like the future was bright. The present was bright, as well. Nothing really cast a shadow on the hellish, measured lives of the people of Red Hill. Until strange ideas started to spread among the people. They seemed to have been brought into the city by the passing merchants, or perhaps by those awakened who still dwelled in the waking world, only traveling to the dream realm in their sleep. At first, no one really paid the odd conversations any attention. A miner who was sent to the field hospital with a gruesome burn on his shoulder scoffed when he heard a patient on the nearby cot denouncing Changing Star and revealing dire crimes she had supposedly committed. An awakened warrior of the Maharana clan frowned when he heard a member of his cohort sharing the news she had heard in the waking world, feeling like the human domain did not need a new supreme stirring up trouble. A waitress working in an inn near the city gates was confused when she heard the cook using an unfamiliar name as a blessing. Because of how remote and isolated Red Hill was, news took time to reach it, and when it did, many facts were usually twisted or lost. So, it took time for the news of the Dreamspawn's clash with Changing Star to get here. Even when it did, locals did not pay it much attention. They did not know, back then, that this news was a sign that the plague had already reached their city. 2802 Inner conflict. The first time the locals felt that something was off came when the peculiar conversations failed to die down after a week or two. Instead, they only seemed to grow louder, and more people seemed to accept the baseless rumors as the truth. It was fine when there was only an occasional oddball or two who decried Changing Star. But when their number grew, the mood in the city shifted for the worse. The rumor mongers continued to spout nonsense about Lady Changing Star and the Immortal Flame clan, and the people slowly started to get angry. After all, these two ideas, the Immortal Flame clan and its last daughter, were not merely representing the authority of the human domain and the sovereign who ruled it. In this world where the gods were dead and terrifying beings were looking at humanity with hunger, they were the closest thing people had to something sacred. Changing Star was a symbol of their hope, and at the same time the source of that hope. The tenacity of the immortal flame was synonymous with humanity itself. Naturally, emotions ran high when someone cast doubt and maliciously undermined either. Especially here in Red Hill, where most people lived in broad view of each other and rarely kept secrets, such sacrilege was bound to cause a few altercations. On more than a few occasions, fists followed insults. The clear glass was marred with blood, and the retainers of the Maharana clan had to pull the brawling citizens apart. The situation was only made worse by the fact that it wasn't only the usual suspects who believed the rumors. The eerie part was that even people whom everyone considered bright and reasonable would suddenly start to side with the apostates. Even one's own friends and family could suddenly abandon their deep-rooted beliefs and principles, changing the way they saw the world. The miner finally returned home after a long shift in the remote quarry, happy to see his wife and parents. To his dismay, however, the former seemed to have had a serious quarrel with the latter, to the point that they were not speaking to each other. The cause of the quarrel was that his wife had somehow become an ardent fan of the new sovereign, Dreamspawn, whom his father despised. The awakened warrior and his siblings held a memorial dinner for their late older brother, who had died in Godgrave. The youngest gritted his teeth and spat that if it wasn't for Changing Star, their family would have still been whole. When the warrior glanced at him in utter confusion and said that it wasn't true, the young man only got bitterly angry with him. The waitress couldn't understand her daughter as of late. She felt like a stranger. Her reverence for Lady Neffes, whom she used to idolize, was suddenly gone. It was replaced by admiration toward the man called Astarion, which seemed almost zealous. When the waitress asked her about it, her daughter just stared at her hollowly. It was upsetting. It was unsettling. Most disturbing of all, no amount of logic and persuasion seemed capable of changing their minds back. Trying to argue with the apostates felt like slamming your head against a wall, because all arguments simply washed over them or were turned upside down to be used against you, even if all rational meaning was lost in the process. That was because most people did not argue with logic, naturally. Most people argued with emotions. As long as they were attached to an idea emotionally, their subconscious would find all manner of ways to make that idea into truth with an illusion of reason. And as those loyal to the Changing Star argued with the growing number of Astarion's zealous supporters, the very idea of truth gradually turned blurry. When it did, the nightmares came. Perhaps they had been tormenting the citizens of Red Hill for a while, but no one noticed because of everything that was happening. People just woke up tired, having spent a restless night tossing and turning in their sleep. It was a few people at first, then more, until half of the city seemed to be walking around with bruises under their eyes. Their expressions, too, were subtly haunted. Still, no one really paid attention until the nightmares became clear and vivid. In them, the people of Red Hill were burning. The soothing flames that had brought them hope once turned scathing and hungry instead. Their skin blistered, and then blackened. The flesh beneath turned into charcoal, then crumbled into ash. The white bones cracked and melted. The nightmares repeated themselves over and over again, instilling a new fear in people's hearts. That was when some of them began to ask themselves a question. The blessing of Changing Star could reach them across the entire world, washing away their wounds in a wave of white flames. But those flames of hers could not only heal, but also destroy. So, did that mean that if Neffes of the Immortal Flame clan wanted to, she could burn anyone, anywhere, at any point in time? Did it mean that for as long as they were a part of her radiant domain, their lives depended solely on her mercy? And that there was no escaping her wrath? Or rather, there had not been. Until the Dreamspawn came to the shores of the Mirror Lake and offered his help. Once that realization crawled its way into the minds of the citizens of Red Hill, the number of apostates among them started to grow with great speed. Until a day came when the awakened warrior saw a fight while patrolling a market. A miner with bronze skin had found himself in an altercation with a cook from a nearby inn, shouting obscenities. "Shut your mouth. Shut your damn mouth. I'm so tired of you crazies. Stop spouting that crap everywhere you go, damn it." The awakened warrior frowned, then walked over to the fighting pair and forcefully pulled them away from each other. It took him one look to realize what was happening. The cook was one of the apostates, and the apostates could never just have an opinion. They seemed hell-bent on spreading the news of their changed worldview as far and as wide as possible, ignoring the fact that it could make some people uncomfortable. The awakened warrior's frown deepened. He supported the battered cook, dusted his clothes off, and then turned to the miner somberly. When he spoke, his voice sounded grave. Quote, "Why are you bothering a faithful servant of Lord Astarion? Standing atop the red, Hill, Dar of the Maharana clan, was observing his city with a concerned expression. He seemed tired, and there were dark circles under his eyes. His gaze was a little unfocused. At some point, his fingers twitched, and he glanced into the distance with a sigh. His imposing figure was reflected in the polished glass, drowning in sunlight. Just as he turned away to look at the horizon, his reflection seemed to smile faintly for a brief, fleeting moment. 2803 Mirror Hell. Things were turning for the worse in Red Hill. Even more disturbingly, things were turning for the worse everywhere. The awakened who still dwelled in the waking world were bringing concerning news every time they returned to the dream realm. Humanity seemed to be reeling in the wake of the recent revelations. What had started as scandalous rumors spread like a plague, and slowly, the unassailable glory of the Immortal Flame clan became a source of anxiety instead. For a great and quickly growing number of people, at least. The streets of NQSC were restless. The mood in other quadrants was tumultuous, as well. Some people felt uneasy about the rumors, others believed them and wanted to express their indignation. They clashed often, just like it was happening in Red Hill, only on a far greater scale. Suddenly, the situation in the waking world turned even more tense and grim than before. The same was happening in the dream realm, albeit some regions seemed to be faring worse than the others. The critics of the Immortal Flame were few and far between at first. Then, their numbers gradually swelled. Eventually, they began to unite and congregate, forming groups and cliques. From there, the apostates established themselves as a significant faction instead of a few disparate, marginal groups. It was still disorganized and lacked cohesion, but was already far more than an inconsequential curiosity. Instead, it had an undeniable presence in all layers of society. Mundane people, awakened, and even ascended, only the saints were still a bastion of loyalty, standing by Changing Star and the Immortal Flame clan like a fortress made of human souls. At least outwardly, they were. Naturally, those who had lost faith in Changing Star did not simply become nihilists. Quite conveniently, a new supreme had presented himself as an alternative target for their respect and admiration just as their confidence in the Immortal Flame was crumbling. It was Astarion, the Dreamspawn. The enigmatic sovereign did not do anything in particular to win their support, preferring to keep to himself. Instead of a magnificent palace, he lived in a ramshackle church on the outskirts of Bastion. Instead of a glorious retinue of powerful saints, he seemed content being tended to by a few mundane volunteers. And yet, his esteem and popularity only seemed to grow. The loyalists who still revere Changing Star and the turncoats who now put their hopes in the Dreamspawn were often at each other's throats. There were no large-scale clashes between the loyalists and the turncoats yet, but the number of ordinary quarrels and confrontations was incalculable. Random strangers were getting into fights on the streets. Long-standing friendships were ending in bitter resentment. Tender relationships turned fragile and shattered. Family members got into shouting matches and stopped talking to each other. Comrades who fought side by side against the nightmare creatures on the front lines of the human domain suddenly couldn't trust their fellow awakened anymore. Of course, this endemic disruption could not fail but result in actual harm. All across the human domain, the spinning chains of industries and infrastructure were screeching as they slowed down. Services and logistics were becoming strained. The military cohesion was suffering, as well, which led to more blood being spilled on the battlefield. The rate of the dream realm being tamed fell. The same disruptions were harming Red Hill, too. In fact, if the denizens of this remote city had access to the big picture, they would have known that their citadel was hit by the plague harder than any other. Just a couple of months after the rumors first arrived at Red Hill, it changed. The awakened were looking at each other with hostility and apprehension instead of keeping an eye out for the nightmare creatures. The lively streets had become tense and quiet. The inns and markets were full of unfriendly stares and hushed voices. There were more accidents in the glass manufactory. The mining output reduced, and when the situation worsened even more, it came to a halt. The miner had no work to do, so all he could do was ruminate at home. His wife was not fighting with his parents anymore, at least, because his parents now admired the man named Astarion, too. Instead, he was the odd one out, suffering their silent treatment. The awakened warrior had lost a few comrades in the battle against the creatures of the hive. They could have lived, perhaps, if they had stayed loyal to the Immortal Flame. Those who accepted the Dreamspawn could not be blessed by the grace of Changing Star anymore, and so, they had died from wounds that could have been washed away by the white flames. He should have felt lucky to still be a part of her domain. But strangely enough, he felt like a hostage instead. The waitress wanted to find a way to understand her daughter again. She used to think that the cook was full of nonsense, but now, she sought him out to ask questions. He spoke at length about the oldest supreme, Lord Astarion, and the more he spoke, the more his words seemed to make sense to her. Things in the outside world, meanwhile, were becoming worse and worse. There were protests in NQSC. Blood spilled on the streets of Ravenheart. In Bastion, a large fire broke out, swallowing entire streets before being put out. A new rumor spread faster than the fire, the rumor that Changing Star had tortured and imprisoned one of her own saints. That was when Red Hill was suddenly cut off from the outside world. The awakened who used to bring news from the waking world stopped returning to the dream realm. The merchant caravan that was supposed to arrive at the end of the month never came. The Lord of Hell sent several cohorts of warriors west to investigate what had happened. They found the enormous wagons standing in the palm of the dead god's skeletal hand, the giant echoes that used to pull them gone. The merchant and the guards were dead. Some of the corpses were torn apart and devoured by abominations, but some remained intact. The fatal wounds on the bodies seemed to have been delivered by human weapons. The news that the scouts brought back plunged the city into an anxious quiet. Strangely enough, the Lord of Hell did not send his masters to the waking world to request assistance from the forces of the human domain. He did not leave his city to perform that task personally, either. A few more weeks passed in tension and anxiety. The quarrels continued, visible to everyone through the glass walls. The nightmares of vicious flames and horrid pain continued, as well. People were angry and tired. More than that, many of them started to feel like they were going insane. Some were convinced that their reflections were behaving strangely, the others swore that they had caught them staring back from the countless glass surfaces. It felt like Red Hill was nearing a breaking point. But then, suddenly, the city found peace again. There were no more fights or quarrels. People were not distrustful of each other anymore, and neither did they show any hostility toward their fellow citizens. A pleasant atmosphere of unity and togetherness returned to Red Hill, and it slowly regained its former liveliness. The mining resumed. The manufactory got busy processing the mined glass. The warriors of the Maharana clan cooperated flawlessly to protect the city, the quarries, and the roads leading to them. The nightmares stopped, as well. Red Hill had not regained peace because its citizens learned to overcome their differences, though. Instead, it had regained peace because everyone became united in venerating the true sovereign of the dream realm, Lord Astarion, the Dreamspawn. The miner was finally happy with his life again. The work at the glass mine was as tough as ever, but all miners were united by a shared zeal. His wife and his parents were getting along nicely, and his transparent home was filled with warmth. The waitress made up with her daughter and finally saw her smiling again. Although the inn she worked at stood empty, many locals still visited to eat a lavish meal. Watching them enjoy the food and the hospitality, she was able to remember why she had found her job so rewarding. The awakened warrior was relieved to see that his comrades were acting like a proper cohort once again. Whatever conflict had broken the cohesion of their unit was gone, and on top of that, his younger sibling seemed to have gotten over his adolescent anger. Their family had found harmony once more. All by the grace of Lord Astarion. The city had become idyllic, well, as idyllic as a city situated in hell could get. It was united in pursuit of the greater good. Of togetherness, of communion. Strangely enough, the Lord of Hell had not been the last to be free of the plague. Instead, it was his cousin, a master of the Maharana clan by the name of Karna. When things had seemed to be utterly calamitous, Karna came to talk to Saint Dar on the spire of the Red Hill. From there, the strange movements of the people below could be seen clearly, revealed by the transparent glass. Dar, we've lost most of our awakened warriors to the plague. It feels like there's no one sane left in the city by now, the quarantine measures you put in place are not working. Isolating ourselves from the waking world was of no use. You need to escape and seek help from Lady Neffes, now. The Lord of Hell, however, did not seem to share in his agitation. Instead, he looked at his cousin calmly. Why? Karna was shocked by the question. What do you mean? We've lost the city. The entire population is under the mind hex of that monster. Saint Dar sighed, then shook his head with a smile. Lord Astarion is not a monster. He is the greater good. He looked into the distance. He is salvation for all. Karna's eyes widened in horror. He took a step back, but Dar was upon him in an instant. Grasping his cousin by the throat, the fearsome saint raised him into the air with one hand. He studied Karna indifferently for a moment, then snapped his neck and threw the body over the edge of the observation platform. Turning to the horizon, Dar inhaled slowly and smiled. Quote. For all. Below him, Red Hill was finally at peace. The idea of changing star could not reach it anymore, and so, she held no power here. Finally, he wouldn't dream of burning alive. His people would be safe, both now and in the future. The future was bright. Dar's expression was blissful, but then, it darkened slightly. Looking north, he frowned. There, thousands of kilometers away, the mists of the Hollow Mountains were boiling. Do you really think that? Dar of the Maharana clan spun, searching for the being who had somehow avoided his gaze and got so close to him. However, all he saw was his reflection on the surface of the clear glass. The reflection smiled pleasantly, that the dream spawn will save everyone. It laughed. How can he save everyone? He can't even save you. Dar's eyes narrowed as he glared at his own reflection. Far in the north, grotesque figures were emerging from the billowing mist. The smile slowly drained from the reflection's face, his own face. It spoke in a cold tone. However, you can help me save myself. For that, you have my gratitude, truly. Dar's hand moved, and the glass exploded, erasing the sinister reflection. At the same time, he closed his eyes tightly. In the silence that followed, the sounds of glass shards falling were like a terrifying melody. And from that melody, a chilling voice came once more. Open your eyes. Dar took a step back. Open your eyes, open. Open your eyes. He refused. The voice laughed. Ah, I am just joking. I have already entered your eyes, and took everything I wanted from them. When Dar of the Maharana clan heard those words, he realized that something had indeed entered his eyes. And then, it entered his soul. At the same time, millions of reflections around Red Hill moved. The miner blinked a couple of times, noticing that his reflection had stopped mirroring his movements at some point. Besides him, his wife was looking at the wall of their home in confusion, as well. The waitress had been taking an order from a client, but found herself getting distracted. Was she just seeing things, or was the reflection looking at her instead of at the guests? The awakened warrior saw a body falling from the height of the Red Hill. It hit the surface of the glass with an appalling squelch, painting the square below red. He rushed toward it, shocked, and saw his pale reflection in the growing puddle of blood. The reflection looked strangely indifferent despite his fear and dismay. The citizens all across the city stopped to stare at the eerie spectacle of misbehaving reflection in shock, and as they looked at the glistening glass, a merciless presence made its way into their eyes. A litany of screams flooded the streets of Red Hill, making the mystical glass vibrate. There was no blood. There were no corpses, either. But by the time the sun rose the next day, Red Hill was no more. 2804 Second Front. Sunny rushed to the glass hell as soon as the news of what had transpired there reached them. Of course, it was already too late. Red Hill was gone. Half of the Longing domain was already gone. Both on Earth and in the Dream Realm, the authority of the immortal flame was quickly collapsing. The plague had consumed every human city, rampaging across the population. By now, it was not even clear if the followers of Astarion were the minority. What was clear, however, was that things would only turn worse in the future. Soon enough, the Hunger domain was going to devour the Longing domain completely, like what had already happened in the Glass Hell. Red Hill was the first human city to fall into the Dreamspawn's hands entirely, but it wasn't going to be the last. Nephis and Sunny were losing the bet Astarion had offered them. In fact, the bet was as good as lost. They were utterly defeated in the war of ideas. Well, naturally they were. After all, the bastard was cheating from the very start. The war of ideas. Fighting to secure the support of the public. What was the point if the adversary could freely manipulate human minds? Truth did not matter. Facts did not matter. One's views and ability to communicate those views did not matter, either. All that mattered was how susceptible one was to the eerie influence of Astarion, the descendant of Heart God, the god of souls, emotions, and hunger. And since Astarion was supreme, there were few beings in the world who could resist his insidious aspect. Sunny and Nephis had anticipated this result, though. They had realized how the war of ideas was going to end early on. That was why they had been searching for a way to cheat, as well, for a way to seal Astarion without slaughtering every person who knew of his existence, and who thus carried the idea of him in their minds. So, they had never really intended to win his bet. They had just been buying time until a solution was found. And in the end, they did find it. Cassie had found it, to be precise. It was just that the way to cheat Astarion out of consuming all humanity was no less difficult, and in many ways far more dangerous than waging an all-out war on him. It was also not something that they could make happen immediately. So, although losing an entire city to the Hunger Domain, complete with its citadel and transcendent ruler, was a heavy blow, Sunny had not been too concerned about Red Hill. Its fall into the hands of the Dreamspawn was not the reason why he had hurried here from G. Avonheart, traversing the Moonriver Plains and Godgrave at a dire speed. The reason was entirely different. By the gods! Standing on a radiant glass plain, with not a shadow in sight, Sunny glanced ahead in stunned, appalled silence. The human city known as Red Hill had undergone a profound transformation since his last visit. First of all, there seemed to be two identical cities and two identical citadels standing on the glass plain now. That, of course, was merely an illusion. In truth, a colossal dream gate towered on the plain behind the city. Its surface was like a flawless mirror, and so, a perfect copy of the city was reflected in it. In the reflection and in reality both, the city was full of people. It was full of enormous, hideous nightmare creatures as well. A vast ocean of them flooded the streets, spilling on the plain beyond. The view of the boundless horde of powerful abominations, with humans peacefully moving between them, was both eerie and chilling. Looking at them, Sunny could not help but scowl and grit his teeth. That damn psychopath. Of course, he knew that the millions of people and the myriad of nightmare creatures were, in fact, a single person. They were all vessels of Mordret, the King of Nothing. He killed them all. Sunny closed his eyes, a pained grimace contorting his face. A city full of people was gone in an instant, many lives snuffed out by the will of a sinister supreme. He had not witnessed a slaughter on that scale since Antarctica. Damn it, damn it, damn it. A murderous anger ignited in his soul for a moment. It was as if they did not already have enough problems dealing with Astarion. Now, Mordret just had to go and throw his hat in the ring, too. The sun was setting, and the entire glass plain was shining like an ocean of molten gold. Out there in the distance, the vessels of Mordred were busy moving in and about Red Hill. Sunny could sense their shadow ahead of him, and below him, too. He glanced down. Despite the fact that the glass plain looked tranquil, there was a harrowing slaughter boiling under its surface. The vessels of Mordred flooded the tunnels of the hive, waging a bloody war on the abominations that dwelled in its depths. Some nightmare creatures were killed and harvested for meat and soul shards, the rest were taken by the King of Nothing and became conduits of his fragmented soul themselves. As Sunny stared into the depths of shining glass, his reflection stared back at him. It smiled. Welcome, Lord of Shadows. Sunny stared at his own reflection, feeling a strong impulse to shatter the glass plane and erase it. The only thing that stopped him was the knowledge that if he did, there would be 1,000 reflections smiling at him from the shards. Taking a deep breath, he held himself back and hissed. What did you do, you demented psycho? His reflection lingered for a few seconds, and then chuckled. Why, I simply was tired of being homeless. So, I made myself a home. It grinned. It's only fair that an honorable king like myself builds himself a castle, isn't it? People might call me Mordred of Nowhere, but living without a single citadel to my name did not suit my fancy. So, I endeavored to correct that injustice. The reflection pretended to look around, taking in the vista of the endless glass plain. This place suits me wonderfully. Yes, it is quite fitting indeed. Don't you agree? 2805 fine print. Having crossed the remaining distance, Sunny entered the city. The humans and nightmare creatures both moved aside to make way, ushering him to the strange, towering shape of the glass citadel. He studied them as he walked, feeling a bit odd to see lumbering nightmare creatures coexisting peacefully with humans. The streets of Red Hill were busy, but tranquil. The odd scene was both eerie and idyllic, like a twisted illustration of an old myth about a world where predators and prey were supposed to live in perfect, harmonious peace with each other. At the same time, Sunny could not help but feel how alien it all was. Even Astarion and the plague he had unleashed did not feel as peculiar and alien as the city where Mordred ruled, where the endless variety of life was reduced to a single point of view. A single mind, a single soul, and single will. Where there was no us and them, only boundless I. In and of itself, it was odd and a little unsettling. It became truly disturbing when one reminded himself that all the vessels of the King of Nothing had been someone once. They had been living beings whose souls he destroyed to take their bodies. Sunny had thought that he was truly disturbed by the sights around him, at least, until he saw a ghastly scene on one of the Red Hill squares. Then, he realized that he had not seen anything yet. There on the square, a long line of humans had assembled in front of several enormous, hideous nightmare creatures. The abominations opened their maws, and humans calmly walked inside, only to be torn apart by sharp fangs and devoured moments later. More and more blood pooled on the glistening glass, shining in the glow of the sunset. Sunny stopped and stared at the vile spectacle, aghast. Are you devouring yourself? Reflected in the blood, his own face looked at him in amusement. Some of my vessels need sustenance, Sunless. Some are more useful than others, as well. I was a little starved there, in the hollow mountains, so sacrifices had to be made. Things are going to get better now that I have access to the hive, though. Ah, what a wonderful feeling. My new home has a bottomless pantry. Sunny looked at his own reflection in disgust. Those are people, you bastard. You are feeding people to nightmare creatures. His reflection smiled politely. Those were people. Now, they are me. The same goes for the abominations. I must say, though, I did not expect you, of all people, to have such prejudices, Sunless. Your powers are much creepier than mine, after all. In fact, a less enlightened person would find them terrifying. Scowling, Sunny looked away from the ghastly scene with an expression of disgust and continued on his way. Reaching the citadel, he made his way to the very peak of the Red Hill. There, an imposing man with dark skin and flawlessly sculpted muscles met him with the same pleasant smile. Saint Dar of the Maharana clan, or rather, what was left of him. The Maharana clan had been wiped out, and its saint was an avatar of Mordret now. Mordret smiled with a stolen face. I suppose we can have a proper conversation now. Sunny stared at him somberly, then spoke through gritted teeth. You've done it now, madman. You've crossed the line. Mordret studied him for a moment before laughing. Oh, did I? What line did I cross, exactly? Sunny pointed to the city below them. Red Hill, you bastard. You slaughtered the entire population of a human city. You killed them all. You broke our deal. Mordret crossed his tan, muscular arms and raised an eyebrow. Let me remind you of the nature of our deal, Sunless. We agreed not to attack each other, you, Changing Star, and me. You gave me the Hollow Mountains, and I promised not to prey on the human domain. What condition did I break, exactly? He shook his head. I never attacked you or Changing Star. I never harmed the human domain, either. I waited patiently until the two of you lost this city entirely to the hunger domain, and only acted then. If anything, I'd say that I showed incredible restraint. His expression twisted. Or did you want me to sit quietly and let the Dreamspawn take everything while doing nothing? Like the two of you, fools, have been doing. Sunny took a step forward and snarled. Yes. That is exactly what I want you to do. Sit quietly and do nothing, as you have been. Mordret laughed, then looked at Sunny with a wry smile. Far below, millions of people and myriads of abominations all stopped what they were doing and raised their heads to look at them, as well. Mordret's smile slowly turned colder. Or what? His stolen eyes, the all-seeing eyes of Saint Dar, glistened dangerously. What will you do if I refuse? Will you call upon Changing Star to burn me? Will you unleash your legion of enslaved souls to wipe me out? Look around you, Lord of Shadows. His smile was entirely gone now, replaced by a cold, threatening ire. Do you really think you can destroy me? Ah, you might have stood a chance immediately after I attained supremacy, but I have not been idle since then. I hunted restlessly, conquering countless corrupted souls and taking their vessels as my own. It wasn't easy, but I felt very motivated. Mordret took a step forward and looked at Sunny darkly. Changing Star's flames are not hot enough to burn me. Your legion is not enough to drown me. Nothing can destroy me, Sunless, but nothing can destroy you, and swallow all that you've built. He stared at Sunny for a few moments, and then suddenly gave him a friendly smile. So let's remain civil. There's no reason to forget our manners, is there? I, for one, see no reason to quarrel. 2806 Fourth Throne. Sunny exhaled slowly. If he was honest with himself, he felt a little ragged. Even with his 7 bodies, there were simply too many things he had to do. It wasn't easy to fight a world war against an immortal sociopath of a demigod while simultaneously fighting a universal war against the entire dream realm and the flood of nightmare gates flooding the waking world. While simultaneously preparing for the inevitable apocalypse and getting ready to conquer not one, but 2 entire death zones. At some point, the taste of defeat had become familiar to him. Was it because he was overwhelmed and buckling under pressure, making mistakes, or simply because the problems he faced these days had grown beyond the scope of being solved without an occasional error? Or was it because he was not fated anymore, and a convenient solution did not present itself at an opportune moment anymore, as if by magic? He had rarely found himself feeling so ineffective before. Sunny did not think that he had changed from the man he used to be that much. Before, he had only ever cared about solving his personal problems. That had not really changed, it was just that he had grown far more powerful. So powerful that his personal problems were the world's problems now. And solving the problems plaguing the world was a far more complicated matter than slaying nightmare creatures. It was a kind of work meant for a god, while Sunny, despite his great and terrible power, was still merely a demigod. His human mind was failing to keep up with the demands of his station. Maybe that was why he had not anticipated the massacre of Red Hill. I should have known. I should have prevented it. Mordret had been clear about his goals and plans when they made the deal. He did not make a secret of his fear of Astarion. He had entered Mirage City to retrieve his other self, so that Astarion couldn't get to his flaw first. He threw himself into a lethal soul battle against Skinwalker to attain supremacy, because only a Supreme could have a hope of prevailing against the Dreamspawn. And finally, he settled for the Hollow Mountains because they were a perfect fortress to wage war against the human domain. Mordret had been convinced from the very beginning that Sunny and Nephis would not be able to last long against Astarion, simply due to the fact that they were weighed down by the burden of humanity. His opinion proved to be correct, considering how Astarion was now holding humanity hostage to protect himself from their wrath. So, Mordret had always assumed that the human domain would become the hunger domain one day soon. Safely hidden in the Hollow Mountains, he had been hunting nightmare creatures from the surrounding regions and making them into his vessels, thus increasing the size and power of his own domain. With that power, he would then be able to attack the hunger domain from the mists of nothingness and retreat back, preventing the adversary from pursuing his raiding parties or counter-attacking. Sunny had known all of it, and yet, he always assumed that Mordret would continue to hide and accumulate power until the human domain was completely destroyed. In hindsight, it was a foolish assumption. Mordret was ready to wage war on the Dreamspawn right now, far in advance of the hunger domain reaching critical mass. Surprisingly, he was also not satisfied with hiding in the mists of the Hollow Mountains despite the great advantages they offered him. Instead of preparing for a long defensive war, he was going on the offensive instead. Sunny took a deep breath. I do think that I can destroy you. My source element is death, after all. As for whether or not I will commit to ending your strange existence, that depends entirely on your actions, I suppose. Mordret chuckled. You seem to think that your Shadow Legion possesses superior strength to my vast collection of fashionable vessels. Personally, I'm of a different opinion. Does it matter, though? Even if you manage to eradicate this host army, I have plenty of vessels hidden away all over. And even if you somehow manage to find and destroy every single one, I'd still survive. Sunny smiled coldly. It doesn't matter, indeed. You might have a myriad of vessels, but you only have one soul. And what would you know? I am someone who excels in damaging the soul. All he had to do was plunge his sword into Mordret's shadow. And since Mordret had millions of vessels now, he also had millions of shadows, each leading to his very own precious soul. He tilted his head a little, looking at Sunny with amusement. Do you think that my father did not try to destroy my soul? That was one of the first things Clan Valor went for. In fact, they did manage to destroy my soul quite easily. But that did not help them. In the end, did it? Sunny stared at him evenly. Did they try destroying your shadow, instead? Finally, Mordret's smile dimmed a little. He remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. What an interesting question. Admittedly, I do not know what would happen if someone targeted my shadow. Maybe it will kill me, and perhaps it will not. But it will definitely require a lot of effort. Do you really want to start a war with another Supreme while fighting desperately against the Dreamspawn? Sunny grimaced. I might. The Dreamspawn is a threat to all of humanity, but until now, the actual death toll he caused is not even a fraction of what you, Psycho, did. Do you even know how many people you killed? Mordret looked at him in confusion. What are you talking about, Sunless? I didn't kill anyone, not a single human. He smiled faintly and pointed to the vast ocean of vessels below. These people died the moment the you surrendered themselves to the Dreamspawn. He is the real killer. I merely stole what he had already taken. Who do you take me for? Some kind of unhinged butcher? His smile widened a little. Well, I might be a bit unhinged, and a bit of a butcher. However, unlike you, I am quite confident in the fact that I don't want to start a war against 2 more Supremes while already fighting desperately against the Dreamspawn. I truly do not wish to antagonize you or Changing Star. That is why I have been behaving myself, holding back from taking the northern citadels in advance, despite how convenient it would have been. I was willing to wait a little longer. Sunny scowled deeply. 2 small details about what Mordret had said did not escape his attention. The first detail was that he had been willing, but, apparently, no more. The second was that he mentioned citadels, not a citadel. Quote. Citadels. Mordret laughed. Of course. You did not think that I would be satisfied with just one, did you? He shook his head. No, of course not. 1 citadel is too few, so, I will only be satisfied when I take a few more. When I take all of them. When I take everything the Dreamspawn hungers after. Sunny stared at him silently for a few moments, and then cursed inwardly. Damn it all.